as a result of World War II, there was a study called the Milgram experiment, which I've spoken about before on a podcast. But the Milgram experiment, look it up, was John Milgram, I think his name was. He wanted to also understand how you can get a nation or a mass of people to do horrific things like the Holocaust. And so look up the Milgram experiment. You know, what he essentially brought in test subjects and had them shock others through a wall to the point of them screaming through the wall because a guy in a lab coat came in and told them to turn it all the way up. And what John Milgram deduced at the end of his experiment is that people will do the most horrific things to other human beings if they are ordered or told to do it by an authority figure, a guy in a lab coat, or a boss, you know, that they are willing to electrocute other human beings to the point of death because they were told to do it by who they perceived to be an authority figure. Look it up. Look up the Milgram experiment. And this is what we're actually seeing in America right now. We're seeing a repeat of history, and we're seeing people all down the hierarchy from our modern day Führer all the way down. We're seeing people follow orders because they were told to by their boss. It's very scary. And it's also very heartbreaking to see and to watch people who, you know, you believe to be intellectual or educated following orders to do horrific things, you know. But human nature is human nature, I suppose. The other thing is, I think it was called the Ash experiment, where, you know, in times like this, the Ash experiment was, and I'm just very, very rough, I'm giving you a rough draft of it, where the study had, you know, five actors come in and then one test study, and they would have two lines drawn on a chalkboard, right? And I might have it backwards a little bit, but you'll get the gist of it. And so both lines were identical in length, or I might have that backwards. One line was clearly longer than the other, and all the actors would act like the lines were the same. And of course, the one person who they were actually studying, who wasn't in on, you know, the study, would go against their own observations, their own senses, because the majority were saying one thing, and then they would agree. And that was the Ash experiment, I believe, where people will, in the collective of a mob, they will forego what their own eyes, their own ears, their own nose, their own heart is telling them is the truth, because, you know, I don't want to be the oddball out. And so it's very interesting how mass stupidity, collective stupidity, can allow what we're seeing and where we're going, because I don't see any indication that we're not going to be repeating this history as far as what happened with World War II. We're already starting to see it with, you know, the targeting of certain demographics with immigration, and that's just the beginning. And you know, all across this country, politicians and people behind a badge and people who have sworn an oath to protect and defend the Constitution from enemies, both foreign and domestic, they're just throwing it right out the window. It's pretty heartbreaking. Which brings me to one of the next things that I think is facilitating this. And that's not knowing where you're at on the map. Let me explain. When I was a kid, my mom and dad used to love watching Unsolved Mysteries with Robert Stack. You remember Unsolved Mysteries? I just dated myself. That's fine. And so I love my parents. I was always up underneath their ass. And so when Unsolved Mysteries was on, I was on. And there was one episode, I vaguely remember it, but it was talking about the Bermuda Triangle, right? And why, so many pilots would go missing in the Bermuda Triangle. And essentially it was, there's something funky going on out there that messes with your compass. And so these pilots, they didn't know where they actually were. They, with the compass spinning around and everything, they assumed through the fog that if they turned, they were actually like in the Gulf. And if they kept going east, they would hit the Florida airstrip and see land, and they could land. But because their compass was off and they didn't know where they were on the globe, they were actually going farther and farther out into the Atlantic until their fuel ran out, and then kerplunk, they went missing. So I think that that's another thing that is causing this mass repetition of history is most people caught up in collective stupidity, they really don't know where they're at on the map. And to kind of bring it home a little bit, let me illustrate what I'm talking about for you with this political chart that Archer the Space Noodle had done up for me. So this is an accurate political scale, and we know that it's accurate because Archer the Space Noodle put it together.
That's the end of this clip, but the full episode is waiting for you. Subscribe to the Downloaded Content Podcast on Spotify or watch on YouTube. For more behind-the-scenes content and exclusive access, sign up for the Downloaded Content newsletter. And while you're at it, pick up Then Came the Flood by Louis Crumpton, available now wherever books are sold.